Hello, and welcome back to another episode of School Daze, where we talk to creators and get the behind the scenes of their creative process. We are here today with my girl, Oneika Raymond. Hey, girl.
Hi, how are you?
Good, I'm doing good. We're so excited to have you here at School Daze. But you're in New York, right?
I am based in New York, so thank you so much for having me and taking me at this time. It's currently 5:20 p.m. in New York, so it's late over there.
Oh, yeah. So what is it like on the ground right now in New York City? You're kind of, as they say, one of the epicenters in the US.
Yes, like basically the epicenter of the U.S. So things are very interesting here. We are currently, it's called NYC, or New York on pause. And that basically means that all non-essential businesses are closed until May 15th. And people are encouraged to stay home and socially distance, as you well know, being in the UK. And so New York is typically the city that never sleeps. People are out and about, people are doing things, and we find ourselves in a very different reality. So things are very quiet here. People are remaining optimistic. It would seem as though we're beginning to flatten the curve. So yeah, the weather is getting to be really, really nice. So we're hoping to nip this coronavirus thing in the bud.
And so what has it been like for your creative process and for all those watching? And one of the reasons why we had Oneika on the show is because she is like as some people would say, the Oneika Raymond. Am I right?
I don't know who you're talking to.
But no, seriously, her career in transitioning from teaching to becoming a full-time social media influencer to then transitioning into the media, where she's working not only in media in terms of travel channel, but she's also working on national network news. Is that correct?
Yes, that is true. So I do a couple shows in Canada, so nationally broadcast shows, and then I also I'm a feature reporter for a television station here in New York City.
Excellent. I mean, what has it been like for the creative process and actually securing work right now? Because, I mean, many are complaining right now that they're not getting any type of work.
Yeah, so I think that this is a very difficult industry to be in at the current moment. But, that's the way it is as an entrepreneur. You have to be flexible, particularly working in media, or if you're doing something with social media influencing. It's really important to be flexible and understand that there are going to be ebbs and flows depending on what is happening in the world. Obviously, as travel influencers, as travel industry people, tourism is way down right now. It's basically non-existent. So naturally, that means that work opportunities are not going to be as plentiful as usual. I'm using this downtime. I mean, I recently had a baby, so I'm using this downtime to take care of my child. She is a handful. And also just to kind of dabble in other verticals like lifestyle. Luckily, as we mentioned before, I do some reporting for television. And so the segments that I do there are not necessarily always travel themed. They also verge onto lifestyle. So luckily, I've been still getting work from other verticals. But yeah, suffice to say that the travel industry right now is definitely hurting, and that has affected my work.
How important do you think it is for creators to not just have that single vertical? As you said, you're expanding verticals.
It is extremely important to diversify, not only diversify your streams of income, but also diversify what you can do. What is your skill set as a creator? Are you a great photographer? Fantastic, but what else can you do? For myself, I'm a writer, I'm a photographer. I am someone who can report. I can do dispatches, live hits from the road, do television and hosting and all of these different things. I can strategize, like I've built a brand now, so I know what it takes to be successful brand-wise, and I can share those strategies, or I can consult other businesses on that as well. So my tip, we have this, I guess there's a saying, it's jack of all trades and master of none. I don't necessarily view being someone who is well-rounded as a bad thing in this industry. I think that the best thing you can actually do is have your eggs in multiple baskets, so that when one thing fails, you at least have a few other things that will bring in income and things that you can do.
When I first came across you, Omo and I were actually just starting to get into blogging. And we were looking for Black creators. Back then, it was like 2014. we weren't necessarily coined creators, but we were looking for Black travel bloggers. And I was looking for female Black travel bloggers. And literally, your name was one of the first ones that came up. And I poured over your blog back then. And I know you've had several reincarnations and so much growth in your visual identity. And so I'm just really excited to have you here today, giving some tips, which we're going to transition to here in just a second. But I know you're going to be talking more about these 5 tips that creators should have micro-influencers should have whenever they want to work with brands.
I think, as you were saying before, we're using this verbiage that at the time didn't exist. We're using this vocabulary that is all relatively new and is quite fluid. So whether you call yourself a creator, whether you call yourself an influencer, a micro-influencer, by whatever name, you are essentially creating content to be consumed by an audience online. So whatever you want to call that thing, I think we're all joined, or we're all linked, because we essentially do the same thing. So yeah, whether you call it influencer or creator, it doesn't really matter.
It's all, I love that. I love that you touched on that.
It's jambalaya.
Yes, gotta put it in the mix. Oh my goodness. Well, listen, we're going to jump right into things and want to go ahead and allow you to share your screen. And yeah, the table is yours.
All right, folks. So Eulanda, thank you so much for having me. I am really excited to be sharing some of these tips with you. As Eulanda mentioned, I am someone who started out as a blogger. I've had my blog since about 2005, and there have been various iterations of it. But for the last 4 years or so, I have transitioned into working as a social media influencer. And one of the questions that I get asked the most is how to work with brands as a social media influencer. So today I'm going to be sharing my 5 tips for working with brands as a micro influencer, because as we all know, not all of us are going to be Kim Kardashian. We're not all going to have 50 gajillion followers hanging on our every word. And so I hope to give you some useful tips and tricks as to how to navigate this world of influencing and also make some of that shmoney.
Hey, bring it on.
Money, some of that cheddar. All right, so tip number 1, one of the first things that you need to do is up your photography game. Now, most of the brand deals that you see, or most of the influencing that you see, is going to take place on Instagram. Instagram is an extremely visual platform. So even though it pains me as a storyteller and as a writer to limit my captions to 300 words or less, I recognize that it is primarily a visual platform. So in terms of upping your photography game, that means that you may need to invest in equipment. They always say that the best camera that you could have is the one that is in your hand, but whatever you have in your hand, you need to make sure that you know how to use it. Now, in my experience, in shaping my visual identity, I am someone who really prefers photography that is crisp, that is clear, that is well composed, which is probably a given for any good photo. We want it to be well composed and very bright. And that is something that comprises my visual identity. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to pull up my Instagram page. Alrighty. So if I may, I'm going to show you what I am talking about. This is my Instagram page. And as I said before, I am someone who really likes bright colors. Now, you'll have some creators who will share, they do have a particular color scheme. But for me, my color scheme is just bright. So I want imagery that's really bright, really evocative. I also want imagery that tells a story. Typically, I'm gonna have a lot of movement. I'm also a huge fan of textures and patterns and colors. So this is a post that is really exemplary of that. This is me in Ghana. I went to Kumasi, so in central Ghana, and I actually got to see them make kente cloth, which you can see here. It's very textured, it's very bright. So this is kind of the epitome of what I like to consider my visual identity. It's represented not only in my photography with regards to the landscapes that I'm shooting, and this is me and my daughter, isn't she cute? But also in the things that I wear. So I like really, really bright colors. And so when people, you know, if we had to assign a visual style, mine would be colors, textures, and patterns. So I'm a fan of architecture, interesting architecture, and that often features in my photos. You'll see me as well, you know, typically moving, or there's some sort of dynamic movement in my photos. Although lately my feed is peppered with pictures of my daughter because, well, she's cute and she's brand new. But this is just an idea. This is a shot that was done by the lovely Eulanda, your trusted host, when we hung out the last time in London. So this is back in October. And again, you know, we have the really bright colors. We have the leaves giving us texture here. I miraculously somehow am matching with the background, even though that was not intentional, but sometimes it is. Sometimes I definitely plan out my outfits depending on where I'm going to be, depending on the backdrop. And yeah, again, like, I just find this is definitely a shot that I planned out. I knew I was going to the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, and as a result, I made sure to wear pink because I knew that the cherry blossoms would be pink. And so, yeah, so definitely when it comes to Instagram, you need to make sure that you are upping your photography game. In terms of photography and in terms of the equipment, I decided that when I got into this space that I was going to invest. I was going to invest in new equipment. So I actually shoot on a mirrorless camera. It's a Sony A7R II, and you know, it has a lot of resolution. So that basically means, I think it's like a 42 megapixel camera. And what that essentially means for me and why I like having this equipment is because with all those pixels, I can crop my photos down to nothing. And still, you can see this was the original photo. I can crop my photos down to nothing, and I can still get a really crisp, clear, and bright photo, like a good quality photo. Another thing that I tell creators to do, so not only like in terms of investing in the right equipment, but also investing in tools to better your skill set. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to spend money. For example, I taught myself a lot of the stuff I know in photography from watching YouTube videos. So it can really be as simple as that. And again, if you don't have the money to invest in a big fancy camera, or a camera body, try and invest maybe in used equipment, like used lenses, because very often it's the lens that will help you to acquire a better quality picture as opposed to the lens body, or excuse me, the camera body. And furthermore, you know, so many phones these days have incredible capabilities with regards to you know, picture taking and photo quality. So it's really important to do that too. So that is my first tip for how to get brands' attention when you're trying to become a social media influencer. Now, for my second tip, concentrate on your audience, but concentrate on the engagement that your posts are getting and not necessarily your follower count. So many people make the mistake of when they get onto social media, they feel as though they need to have 1 million followers in order to be successful. And I can tell you that that is not necessarily the case, because I certainly do not have 1 million followers, but I've been able to work with some pretty big brands, pretty big consumer brands like Hyundai or Lay's potato chips, and some really big airlines as well, like Norwegian Air, Lufthansa, so on and so forth. And one of the reasons that brands tend to reach out to me is because of the engagement on my posts, not because of the number of followers that I have. So for example, what I tend to do, for example, on Instagram is I usually tend to spark discussions in my posts. So not only am I creating or crafting what I hope is going to be a beautiful image, I'm also attaching a caption to it that is equally as evocative, because what I want to do is I want to get people to engage. So you want to make sure that you focus on the engagement of your posts and not obsess over the number of followers that you have. So as I was saying, I've worked with a number of really large consumer brands on paid campaigns, and I don't have 1 million followers, but I do have a very engaged following. So for instance, when I create my Instagram posts, not only am I creating images, or not only am I posting images that I think are very evocative, I'm also posting a caption that I hope is going to engage my audience as well, and is going to encourage them to reply, to like, to share, to comment. So for example, when I'm creating content, I also have 3 guidelines in the back of my head, the 3 tenets, if you will. The first one is the content that I'm sharing educational? Because I always want to make sure that I teach people something. Is it something that, is the content empowering? So will people, join the path of, like, follow the path of self-discovery, or will it encourage them to go out and do something out of their comfort zone, feel stronger, feel better about themselves? And then finally, does it encourage them to explore? Obviously, as somebody who's a travel influencer, I'm in the business of influencing other people's travel decisions. So ultimately, when I post content, whether it's for a client or whether it's for myself, I want to promote that destination or that thing that I'm showing in my content. So typically, whenever I post something, I run through those 3 things. Is it empowering? Is it educational? And will it encourage my audience to explore? And typically, if I at least hit one of those things, then I'm going to have a piece of content that is really engaging. So what I would more so focus on, if your images are not that strong, if they're not that evocative, then focus on the discussion portion. And, let me share my screen again. Okay, so for example, if I, here's one, here's a recent post, and this is, for example, a recent post that I did about my daughter. Obviously, she's making a face there, so that's funny.
That's cute. That's cute.
When we talk about the 3 E's, as I'd like to call them, so empowerment, education, and exploration. Now, I'm not necessarily traveling here. My daughter is a newborn in this picture. I think she was maybe only like 5 days old, something like that. And we're basically taking a picture out in front of our apartment. We're in Long Island City, New York. However, in terms of my post and those 3 E's, even though the post isn't necessarily, like encouraging people, well, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's necessarily empowering, this particular post. But if you take a look at the caption, I'm actually sharing my favorite family travel accounts. So obviously my daughter's really young, and due to coronavirus, we haven't been able to travel anywhere. But in the meantime, I have been kind of stocking up on resources and consuming accounts that feature families that go out there and hit the road and travel. So on this particular post, I'm sharing how many accounts? 2, 4. I'm sharing 5 accounts of family travel bloggers. And that was a really great resource for people. As well, the picture itself is evocative. Everybody loves babies. It's really bright, it's colorful. So even though I'm not necessarily in front of an exotic backdrop, the post itself is educational, and it's encouraging people to go and go forth and explore these accounts, go forth and explore the world as parents, or as people traveling as a larger collective, or traveling as a family. So when we talk about engagement, and unfortunately, I feel like on this particular format of Instagram, you can't necessarily see how many comments there are, but here we go. Can you see that? So it has, this post has over 4,000 likes, and it has 221 comments. So once again, like, I was providing information that people thought was interesting, and then some people were commenting because they thought the photo that I posted of my daughter was funny, and so on and so forth. So this is kind of what I try to do in terms of engagement. If I go here, you can see that this post has 238 comments. This one has 99 comments. This one only has 54 comments, 186. But again, What I'm trying to endeavor to do, even if the picture itself isn't particularly fabulous, because not every picture is going to be a banger, I am trying to generate some sort of discussion because that ups my engagement. And you can see here, I was talking about being featured on CNN, but the reason why this has so many comments, and this has 304 comments, is because I asked the question of whether or not it was okay to recline your seat on a plane. And again, this is a topic that people feel very impassioned about.
You do.
That's reflected in the amount of engagement I got on that post. So my third tip is a really quick one. It is basically to build out other platforms besides Instagram. So a lot of people, they want to work with brands, but they think that Instagram is the be all and end all. And I mentioned before, we do not want to put our eggs all into one basket, because particularly with Instagram algorithms, it's just not a safe bet. So for myself, obviously, I've been a blogger for a really long time. I've been in the space for a really long time. So before Instagram became a thing, I had a Facebook page, I had my own website, I had a YouTube page, I have a Twitter page. What I recommend for influencers or wannabe influencers, people who are new to the space, is that they only, don't focus entirely on Instagram, but only have maximum 2 or 3 other platforms, just because it gets really overwhelming. And if you spread yourself too thin, you won't end up being able to create quality work, and probably you won't be consistent, which brings me to my fourth tip. And this one is also really quick as well. And it is to be consistent.
Yes.
Now, they say that Rome was not built in a day. It takes time to build an audience. It takes time to build a body of work. It takes time to get recognition, both from your peers, from your audience, and from brands. So keeping this in mind, realize that you have to be in this, not even necessarily for the long game, but at least you need to see it out till the medium term. If you are coming into this industry thinking you're going to get rich quick, or get popular quick, or get 1 million followers quickly, then you're setting yourself up for disappointment. So one of the things that I always recommend for creators to do is to stockpile content and to not go live until you have at least 5 to 10 posts stored up so that you can schedule them. When you are trying to build an audience, what you're really trying to do is not only share your content with them, but you're also trying to kind of build expectations and build anticipation of your content. So if people know what to expect from you and they know when that content is coming, then they will be more liable to stick around. It's very difficult to grow an audience or to sustain an audience if you are not consistent. If you only post once every month, or if you only post, irregularly, people won't know what to expect from you, and you'll just fall off their radar. So it is really important to be consistent. Once you have built up your audience of loyal fans who love everything you do, then you can afford to kind of slip and slide a little bit. But even for myself, I have a newborn baby. I have lots of things going on in my life. I've been at this for a long time. I rarely let, I would say, 3 to 4 days go by without posting some sign of life online. And as a result, I have this huge body of work that I'm really proud of. I have this huge body of work online because I've been consistent. And so, I attribute my success not necessarily to being the best or to being super innovative, because I am neither of those things, but I kept on going where a lot of people quit. Yeah. And I almost feel like I need to put this on my tombstone, because so many wars have been won just by showing up and sticking around and waiting for other people to get tired. So if I could provide any one tip, if we could only do one tip, it would be that one. So that's a free tip.
That's a great one. It's finish. Don't focus so much on pioneering. Finish.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Love that.
And finally, my 5th tip is to create a media kit and to pitch brands. Now, I'm lucky, I guess, or blessed to be in the situation at this point where I don't have to pitch anybody. If you see me do something, 99 0.9% of the time, it was because I was approached by a brand. But you have to understand, I've also been around since 2005. My blog, even though Tumbleweed is rolling through it currently, my blog has a good 800 posts, if not 900, like blog posts on it. So I have been producing content for a long time. I've gotten, dozens and dozens of features in different media outlets. And that link juice, from people linking to my blog, from people sharing my articles, from being featured on all these different media platforms, has allowed me to, I guess, not necessarily coast, but it means that I have like a reputation and a body of work that I can fall down upon, right? So my name is out there, and therefore I don't really need to reach out to people or to brands. I don't necessarily need to pitch them anymore. However, in 2016 and in 2017, when I was first starting out and when I had decided to do this full time, because you have to understand, I had a blog from 2005, but I worked a day job. I had a day job up until late 2016. So 2016, 2017, I pitched heavily. And at the time, again, things were not as sophisticated as the industry was definitely not as sophisticated as it is now. But even then, I, cobbled together a media kit, and I cobbled together kind of like a pitch email, and I would send this email out to brands and attach my media kit. Now, what does that mean? If you are not familiar with the media kit, absolutely go ahead and Google it. But basically, it's kind of like your online resume of sorts. So in a media kit, you are going to have your like information about you. You're going to have the stats from your various media platforms. You're going to talk about maybe like awards or recognition that you have gotten for your work. Perhaps you're going to include like certain elements of your work. You're going to link to different like press features, perhaps that you've been in. And so again, like this is going to be a document that is constantly evolving, and I want to show you my latest media kit just to give you a better idea of what I mean. All right, so this is a copy of my media kit, and it's beautifully done. I wish I could take credit for making it, but actually, no, I paid somebody to do this. But again, like you don't necessarily have to do that. Like if you're starting out, you don't necessarily have the funds to do this. So yeah, you can bootstrap it, and that's absolutely what I did. But after doing that for a certain number of years, I decided that I instead was going to employ somebody to do this and put this beautiful media kit together for me. But basically, as I said, it's going to be an online resume. This is quite an extensive media kit. It has like 7 or 8 pages. Because I've been around for a really long time. So for example, I want to pitch myself as someone who is not only a social media influencer, but someone who is also a host, and someone who is a speaker, a writer, a host, and somebody who just runs the gamut of media and has a presence all over the place. And so as a result, I have individual pages for each I guess, element of my professional pedigree, I guess you could say. And as you can see here, I have kind of a press page where it talks about all the different features and so on that I have been featured in. But yeah, again, like that's going to end up being your calling card of sorts. That's the way that you can entice brands to work with you, and oftentimes it's a way you can show them what you've been doing and what you're capable of, and what you have done in a way that your current social media feeds aren't necessarily going to do. So for example, on my Instagram, I have really pretty pictures and I have these really short captions, but typically I don't put my hosting stuff on there. Typically I don't put any of my press features on there, nor do I like put any of the freelance writing I do, because even now in 2020, I still do a fair amount of freelance writing for different publications, but those aren't necessarily going to feature on my Instagram. However, it might be important for a brand to know that, I have connections at X publication, or that, I have been featured in this other publication, because for their purposes, that may make me a more attractive candidate to work with. So that would be my tip. Definitely get yourself a media kit, and don't be afraid. Reach out and pitch to brands. When you are new, people don't know who you are. And so you need to make sure that you get yourself out there, and you can't necessarily sit back and wait for somebody to come and find you, because the sea of influencers, particularly now, is vast. And so folks are going to find you if you don't put yourself out there. So that was my 5th tip, but I do have a bonus tip. And this one I think is a really important tip as well. And it is to create content for the audience you have, and not necessarily the audience that you want. So often as creators, we get tied up in our follower count. We get tied up, or we focus too much on the people who are not following us, to the detriment of the people who are following us. So I would encourage you to take a good long look at the demographics of the people who are clicking like, who are clicking those hearts, who are commenting, who are sharing those posts, who are DMing you, the people who stay in your inbox, because those are your true fans. And those are the ones that, will carry you through in terms of, like when the Instagram algorithm is acting a fool, or, these are the people, these true fans of yours are the ones who essentially legitimize you. And so I would encourage you to create content for them. For myself personally, I look at my demographics, I look at my analytics, Instagram, the IG analytics, is that what it's called? The
Yeah.
stats.
Yeah, the native analytics. Yeah.
Yeah, so that little tab or that little window will give you a wealth of information about the folks who are following you, i.e., their gender, their age. I think it also gives their geographic region. And this information is equally important for brands, because they want to know who they're targeting as well. So oftentimes I've had a brand reach out to me and say, hey, can you tell us, or can you send us a screenshot of your IG analytics, because we want to know not only what your reach and so on and so forth is, but we also want to know who it is, who is actually following you. So if I look at my demographics, pretty much whether it's my blog or whether it's my social media platforms like Facebook or Instagram, I would say over 80% of my following is female. And I would also say that a good third of those people, if not more, are African American. So again, like if I have a brand who wants to work with me, typically it's because they want to reach this market share of African American females who are in their late 20s to 30s. These are the people who they're looking for, and they recognize that that is my primary audience. That's the demographic that comprises my, most rabid fan base. And as a result, they're like, okay, well, we want to reach that demographic. We want to hit that target market, and therefore we're going to work with you. So don't get tied up in, or don't waste time worrying about the people who you cannot reach. Worry about making sure that the ones who are currently following you stay. So with all that said, that was a mouthful. If you made it to the end of that, bravo. And I will say a little prayer for you. Thank you so much for having me on, Eulanda.
Thank you. Goodness, you are always dropping gems. And again, you did not disappoint me. So many incredible gems. And I think people are going to be able to really take a lot from, especially during this time. I think we're in a very interesting time, economically, socially, just creative wise, in terms of, just kind of continuing on the conversation, in terms of creators pitching brands right now. Hey, what do you think about that? I mean, in different verticals, of course, we're not talking necessarily travel, but outside of that, is this a good time for creators to pitch brands?
It depends on which brand. I think that you can always pitch. Whether or not you'll get a response is a different story. So it's obviously important to be really cognizant of what is going on in the world right now. Clearly, you're not going to pitch like an international travel brand, because they're all in the crapper right now because of the global pandemic. But certain things, like for example, I'm a new mom, I haven't been pitching anybody, but I think to myself, oh, well, maybe I should pitch, that stroller brand, because regardless of what is going on in the world, people are always going to have babies. They're always going to need bottles and diapers and strollers and all kinds of other baby paraphernalia. So you can absolutely pitch brands at this time. You can work with brands. You just need to be cognizant of what vertical they're in and whether or not you can create relevant content for them right now. Does it make sense? Does it make dollars and cents? These are two sort of mantras you need to repeat over and over. But I feel like a lot of the time we're paralyzed by fear. And we don't reach out because we're like, oh, well, maybe it's not the right time, or they're not going to respond. And it's kind of like, well, if they don't, they don't. And at least you would have tried. And I know we did an IG Live session last week about career transitions. And one of the things I said then, I will say again in this context, which is I would rather regret having done something than not having done it. Absolutely. So if I reach out to a brand and they think that it's gauche, well, you know what? At least I reached out to them, and I started a professional dialogue. As long as the reach out wasn't like abrasive or completely untoward, as long as it was professional, then it shouldn't be an issue. If you don't want to work with me, okay, fine. But at the very least, I attempted to get on your radar.
So we've also been asking all of our creators that we've had featured on School Daze that if they've had a particular charity in mind that they wanted to partner with, to definitely share it. Now, Oneika has encouraged everyone that's tuning into the broadcast that if you've learned something, feel free to donate to your charity of choice. So it's not compulsory to give, but if you do feel like you've learned something and you want to support COVID efforts around the world, then feel free to donate to a charity of your choice. So Oneika, I just want to thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been great. And anyone that's watching, if you have questions, feel free to jot them down below. I'm sure Oneika will be more than happy to answer them. Also, feel free to slide into her DMs. And if she's not too busy, with baby K or doing a million other things, she will definitely get back to you. She's really amazing at that. So again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of School Daze, where we talk to creators and get that behind the scenes look into their creative process, and they even teach you some tips. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again.